The Skew chisel is an incredibly versatile and important tool for spindle turning, but it can be incredibly frustrating at times. In this video, I'm going to look at some of the most common catches, why they happen, and hopefully how to avoid them. The number one thing that I'd suggest to try and avoid catches, and indeed to head off most problems in turning, is to sharpen your tools and make sure they're well sharpened. A skew is probably one of the easiest tools to sharpen. My beading and parting tool is dead straight across, or you might be looking at a more traditional skew, in which case it's just at an angle, depending how angled that angle of skew is. When I talk about sharpening and grinding, try not to think of it as grinding as such. Really what you're trying to do is clean the bevel. So if I just colour in that bevel with a marker pen, with a Sharpie, just make it black like that, then I can see exactly what I need to clean off. So if I fire up the grinder and just touch that onto the wheel, you can sort of slide it side to side. These CBN wheels don't really wear out, so it doesn't really matter too much, but I am just conscious to try and use the whole wheel from time to time. But if you look at that, you can see that the whole edge is shiny right up to the tip, and that is really what you're looking for. As long as that whole bevel is shiny all the way to the edge, you know the tool is sharp and it's ready to go, and it's going to be performing as best as it possibly can. The first catch I'm going to try and demonstrate for you is a run back while I'm planing. So you'll remember from the planing video that I try to identify where the center of the tool is and try and keep the cut in that kind of lower half there, somewhere in that region. Generally will give me a lot better control. So if I make a few cuts how they should be, and I'm just using a bit of sapele, which is a hardwood. You notice in the table leg demo, I was using pine, and I really recommend pine to start out with. Pine is a lot easier to turn than hardwood. If you start turning with a dense hardwood, you're gonna find it a lot harder. It's gonna hit your morale and it's gonna put you off. If you start off with pine, you're a lot less likely, to get catches. So I'm hoping I can pick up a couple of catches in this sapele. We're aiming to cut in that lower quarter area, so here, and you can see straight away that the shaving is coming from exactly where I want it to, so right in that bottom area there. What happens though when the cut starts to go a bit higher? Well, it's not quite so controllable, but when you get a bit more experience, you can cut a little bit higher. You can hear that's a little bit sort of juddery, not the smoothest, and you can see that I'm now cutting a little bit further up there. Now, what happens if I go right up to the top? That's what happens. So let's stop the lathe, have a little look at that. And you can see we get a good old chunk come out there, and it is the long point that's done the damage. And it's purely because I presented the tool in such a way that there was nothing supporting beneath that edge. So as the wood was here, the wood came round onto that top edge. There's nothing supporting the wood, so the tool had no choice but to slam down. As it slammed down, it stopped, and then it dug into the wood. So it makes a real mess. So to avoid that, mark out your tool, find that lower area there, and try and make sure you're cutting below the center line. So I'll do that the correct way once more, just to try and emphasize the point. We're here, and we're cutting beneath the center. You'll see I'm using the wider tool here. The wider tool, some will argue that the wider tool is safer or easier to use for planing because it's got a bigger safe zone, which is true, but it also has a bigger no-go zone, and that means that if you get it wrong, the potential for catches is much, much higher. So this is good. We're cutting below that center line. This is bad. Another type of catch that can happen, usually just as you come to engage the tool in the wood, and sometimes it's a planing cut, sometimes it's going to roll a bead, and this one often catches you off guard, and it's usually because you haven't followed what's often quoted as the ABC of turning. So anchor, where you get your tool against the tool rest and you're sort of positioned ready to go. Bevel, so that you touch the bevel first, so that the bevel's riding, and then you move into the cut. So if you sort of don't do that, as you get more experience, you tend not to need to sort of follow that quite so obviously. And so often you'll just go in and you'll just find the natural position of the tool. The problem is if you get that slightly wrong and you miss your bevel, you end up just touching the edge, and then you'll get that run back. Let's see if I can do that catch for you. Fire up the lathe. So rather than anchor, bevel, cut, which is a very controlled way to get into the wood, you'll anchor and then you'll just go straight into the wood. 2 for 1 on that one. In that case, what happened, I wasn't gripping particularly tight, so I sort of let it happen, but the tool wanted to run back, this time with just a fairly shallow sort of scoop, but as it slid back, the top of the tool dug in, and then we got the first kind of catch as well. So, like I say, 2 for the price of 1 on that one. So make sure that as you come into the wood, tool's on the tool rest, pick up the bevel first, then make your cut. Otherwise, what can happen is you can you get that run back and then the top edge. So get your handle low, lift it in, anchor, bevel, cut. In the video where I showed the slicing cuts, I showed that when you're doing this slicing cut down the end grain, you really have to keep the very tip of the tool engaged. And as you're cutting down there, there is a tiny, tiny little gap between the top edge of the tool and the wood. And I did mention that if the tool does come into contact higher up on the edge with the edge of the timber here, that it will throw back. So let me just show you again how that's done safely and correctly, and then I will see if I can get a catch and see what happens. So I'm back to using my beading and parting tool, but the rules on this are exactly the same with whichever tool you choose to use. So done correctly, the bevel is in line with the cut, so I'm cutting in line toward the center. The handle starts low, and I'm going to pick up the cut and slice it in. And you can see the cut is right on the tip of the tool, and that there is that tiny, tiny little gap just up here, so that the top edge of the tool is not going to contact with that edge. So one more time, done correctly. Okay, and then if I get that wrong, and I really don't like doing this, but if I get that one wrong and I contact further up on the edge, you can see the dust forming, then the tool runs back. The edge is at an angle, and so the edge wants to slice back at that slight angle, and you can see that once again, as the tool sort of skids back into the wood, the tip engages and it spirals back, and we get quite an exciting catch with quite a messy edge, so that we then have to remove a good bit of wood to deal with that, or potentially the piece is ruined. So let's try that again, done properly. We want to get the tool upright with the bevel in line with the cut. I'm going to cut right on the tip of the tool and slice in. But that little gap at the top is so important. That's done right. That's done wrong. The next kind of catch is once again on the slicing cut, but this time it's more of an entry cut. When you cut a chamfer or a V-cut, you really need to be slicing into the wood so that the very tip of the tool enters the wood and the bevel very quickly gets something to rest on. And throughout the series, I've talked about how the handle should start low and you lift the handle and push forward so that you slice into the wood. And that's the same with that slicing cut down here. Even the peeling cut, I start with the handle low and lift it and slice it in. The problem with just pushing the tool and jabbing it into the wood is that the tip doesn't engage and then the bevel doesn't have anything to rub against. So let me show you how this is done properly. So if I go to try and create a V-cut, we can make, we'll go this way, a bit more central. if I do it correctly, I'm going to start with my handle low and I'm going to lift in. I'm then going to tip the tool and I'm going to lift in the direction that the tool is, the edge is pointing in. So I'm going to start here, handle low, lift in and slice. Then the other way, lift in and slice. And by lifting, the tip of the tool engages and the bevel is very quickly rubbing on the wood. And that bevel is what gives you all of your control. So if you don't have bevel contact, that's how you get the catch. So let me show you what happens by doing that if I just push. So if I tip the tool, so it's pretty much horizontal, and just push into the wood, you see that? Do it again. And what happens is, if I just push in and the tool is at a slight angle like that, the tool, because it's the angle is like this, the angle of the edge is like that, as it touches, it's just going to pull off. Likewise, if I've got the tool at this kind of angle and I touch, it's going to skid. I've really got to keep my handle low and lift it in, lift in. By lifting the tool in, I've got the control. As soon as I forget to lift and just sort of poke the tool in, it wants to skid away. And as soon as you start getting skids like that, it gets very frustrating, becomes a bit of a mess, and you have all sorts of scratchy, spiral messes all over the timber. One of the most common and most frustrating types of catch is the spiral catch when you're trying to roll a bead. And the main reason for this is a lack of bevel contact. So when I'm rolling the bead, let's fire that up, I explained that I always try and use the very tip of the tool. And by using the tip of the tool, you can see that I raise up that little feathered edge and that V groove there. And that means that the tip of the tool is engaged. And when the tip of the tool is engaged, the bevel naturally falls into place behind the cut. So as long as you keep moving forwards and you keep the tool engaged like that, the tip of the tool engaged, you have good control. When it goes wrong, generally what's happened is you're more planing. So here I'm planing, you can see I'm getting a more curly shaving, so that's fine, there's no real problem with that. But if I'm planing like that, I have the more difficult responsibility to keep the bevel in place myself. So the way I manipulate the tool will have a huge effect on what happens here. And if I happen to lose that bevel contact in any way, well, I can't do it. Let's see. There we go. Bevel contact came off, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with that type of catch. It's a really frustrating catch, and it's a very messy catch as well. Often it's quite deep and quite kind of damaging. Let's do that again. We'll do it the other way. So ideally, what we're looking to do is we're going to use the tip of the tool and we're going to create that V groove and that feathered edge just there. That's working quite nicely. I've got good control of the tool and I'm creating quite a nice shape. But if I start planing, planing is fine. If you watch Steve Jones turn, he will plane around a bead. But as soon as my bevel comes off, I can't get it to happen. Let's try again. As soon as my bevel comes off, let's try a new one. Let's try this one. So we're going to plane around here. There we go. Now these do happen. They still happen to me from time to time, and they still make me jump as well. So the main thing is the practice, doing more and more of them, and good quality practice, understanding why they happen, can really help you. So as I said here, I've been cutting round, my bevel's come off, and the only thing that's still in contact is the tip of the tool. Nothing's really in contact until the catch happens, and then only the tip engages, a little bit like when I just poked the tool in and it ran away. That's basically what's happened here. Just the tip of the tool. The tool is at an angle, so it's wanting to run back, and it sort of pulls in as it runs back, so you get that nasty spiral catch. So really frustrating and a real mess. And really the way to get around that, to avoid that from happening, is to make sure you're keeping the cut on the very tip of the tool. You're looking out for that V groove and that feathered edge, and you're creating your bead like that. Remember, there's no rush. You don't have to do this at 100 miles an hour. Just take your time, and you can create a really nice clean bead in control of the tool by keeping the tip of the tool engaged at all times. So the practical reasons for catches are blunt tools and poor tool presentation, but there's a secondary reason that I've hit upon that causes catches that people don't always fully realise, and I think it's very much a psychological issue. And when I'm demonstrating, I like to use a sporting analogy because I feel like people kind of understand a sporting analogy. And if you think of your team, whatever sport that might be in, there will have been a point at some point, maybe this season, maybe in the recent history, where a player has got to a point where it's a pivotal point in the game, maybe a penalty, maybe an important shot, they need the runs, whatever the sport is, and something's got in their head, they've bottled it, it's gone wrong, the game's lost. If you've ever watched England play football, the inevitable penalty shootout often ends in the same way. Those lads, they can kick a ball into a goal blindfold, day in, day out. But when they've got all those eyes in that stadium, all those eyes on the TV at home, it gets in their heads and they suddenly are unable to kick the ball in a straight line. And turning is very much the same. We've all done it. You'll have been turning all day on a project. You've not had a single catch. It's all going well. You stand back and have a look at it and you think, maybe I just need one more cut, but I've got to be careful. And it's at that point where that thing goes off in your head, and all of a sudden you grip the tool a bit more firmly. You get this kind of tension across your shoulders, and all of a sudden the thought pattern goes from enjoying turning, enjoying making the thing you've been turning, into, oh, I really don't want to get a catch and spoil it now. And the problem is, as soon as that happens, the chances of a catch just skyrocket. And the Skew is one of those tools where it can almost smell fear. So, and obviously I say that tongue in cheek, but it does kind of work. If you're scared of the tool, you're going to hold the tool a bit more firmly, you're going to be more cautious of it, and things are far more likely to go wrong. I always say when you're turning, you should do it almost like you don't care, because if you can do that, the chances of a catch are far less likely. Everything is better when you're relaxed. So my number one tip, yes, you need sharp tools. Yes, you need good tool presentation, but you also need to be relaxed and calm and in a good space so that you can enjoy your turning, and hopefully it'll be catch free. I hope that's been helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.